Another man's pain is sacred ground, which is why I've approached this video with considerable trepidation. I would never want to say anything about suffering that might come across as glib or presumptuous. Please know from the outset that this video offers no insights whatsoever about alleviating pain, but just a few thoughts about how to endure pain that can't be alleviated, concepts that have been helpful to me personally. Also, I'm not going to say anything with regards to the problem of acute agony, the kind that literally strips a man of his faculties, because that's kind of a whole different ballgame. This will definitely be my longest topical video to date, mainly as a function of the difficulty of the subject matter. But please understand, I make no claims at being some kind of expert. And please withhold judgment until you've watched the video to the end. Again, these are just a few thoughts about dealing with pain based on my own experiences, on the off chance that they might in some way encourage some of you. Because pain is a bitch. It probably goes without saying that if you are unwell, physically or emotionally, and there's a viable path back to health, it would be a good idea to take it. That said, it's probably equally obvious to anyone who has lived long enough that pain is not always escapable. Whether your pain affects primarily your body or your mind, whether it is temporary or chronic with no end in sight, whether it is readily apparent to others or known only to you, there are limits to how much modern medicine and the sympathy of others can help. It's a terrible truth, but in many ways it is pain that defines a man. It shows him and the world who he is when stripped of his comforts and crutches. Indeed, how a man bears pain is largely the degree to which he is a real man at all. This is precisely why so many stories in Western culture revolve around the wounded hero. We celebrate brave characters like Frodo Baggins, Captain America, and the great Western gunfighter, Shane, because we hope when it comes our turn to carry on in spite of some painful burden that we'll be able to do like them. When you've exhausted all of the sane options for mitigating your pain, there's nothing left to do with the remainder but to bear it well or poorly, to either summon your grit in spite of how you feel so you can still do yourself and others some good, or else to spiral inwards to the point that you are effectively no longer a wounded man, but just one big wallowing wound, no good to yourself or anyone else. It's an act of will to bear pain well. But here's the rub. It is almost impossible to do if you are convinced that you are suffering for nothing. That's because for human beings, meaning is everything. Indeed, meaningless pain is almost the definition of unbearable. So, although meaning may not have any anesthetic properties per se, maintaining a laser focus on it is indeed the key to bearing pain in a manly fashion. Now, some pain comes with a bit of that all-important meaning, sort of pre-bundled. For example, let's say you run into a burning house and pull someone to safety, and you get badly burned in the process. Well, after the fact, you're going to be in great pain, but you'll also have a deep satisfaction in knowing that your pain means something. It means someone else is alive who otherwise wouldn't be. Your burns are still incredibly painful, but the knowledge that you saved someone's life brings with it a tremendous dignity that actually helps you to feel like the cost to yourself was worth it. And that is no small thing, because pain that doesn't come with that kind of associated meaning can really mess with your head. Like if one morning you're heading down the stairs and you just slip. You step wrong and you fall hard, winding up in a heap at the bottom with a herniated back that leaves you unable to stand. What the hell's that about? It's just stupid, right? And now your whole life is in the shitter. For what? Nothing. No heroic deed, no act of self-sacrifice, just a meaningless accident that benefited no one. And now, you not only feel like an idiot, but you're pretty much screwed. Well, in the moments immediately following some stroke of really bad luck, a bit of cursing and fuming is understandable. But sooner or later, you're going to have to start making decisions in light of your new, unsolicited reality. And at that point, it's worth calling to mind that it's not untrue that some of the things in life that come to us unbidden are the very things that present us with opportunities to become more like our heroes. The bottom line is that whether it comes with any pre-bundled meaning or not, if your pain persists, then over time, its meaning becomes largely a thing you must decide upon, consciously define, and intentionally choose. Like a sculptor setting his chisel to a formless boulder, you need to take the catastrophe life has dropped in your lap and, by the application of character, transform it into something worthy, all without the benefit of clear instructions. It's no small feat, but if you don't purposefully choose to do this and keep on choosing to do it, it will be increasingly difficult to keep your nerve, to not come unglued, and to remain cognizant of others. But how do you find that meaning? Manifest the statue bound up in the rock. The meaning that you need can't be arbitrary, and it can't just be some pleasant-sounding Pollyanna nonsense. It has to be real in order to be powerful. And as a brief aside to those of you who happen to believe in God, with all due respect, I don't know that there's much wisdom in pinning a particular set of circumstances on him. Presuming to have enough insight to disentangle a single divine thread, whether an action or an intention, from the rest of life's infinitely complex tapestry is, let's just say, risky. So, in the absence of a neon sign, easy-to-read label, or lightning in the sky, is it actually possible for a man to find genuine meaning in his pain? Are there any universal truths that every man can lay hold of, regardless of the specific nature of his pain or how it came to him? I think so. And based on my own personal experience, there are two concepts in particular that I'd commend to any man without hesitation. The first concept is this: if you commit yourself to bearing pain well, you are bestowing upon yourself a thing that no one else can give you. You are putting yourself in the noble company of the brave men you have always admired, whether in fictional stories or in real life. That means that when you watch a movie in which some hero is honorably shouldering some awful burden, especially one he didn't ask for, you aren't saying to yourself, gee, I wish I was a real man like that guy, instead of being just a boy. Rather, you know in your heart that the guy you are watching on screen is the kind of guy you are. That's a powerful, powerful thing to know about yourself. It bolsters you at the deepest level of your person, lending you a profound inner strength. No other person can bestow this upon you, and you can't buy it with money. But if you want the respect of other men, real men, including yourself, it's the kind of self-mastery and self-knowledge you cannot be without. The second concept relates to something my father used to tell me when I was a boy. He used to say, "Son, someday when you are a father, remember that you owe your kids 3 things: example, example, and example." Well, as it happened, his own ability to live up to that admonition would be tested in the extreme, just as I was entering my teenage years. A terrible neck injury left him barely able to stand. And for most of my high school career, he had to spend the majority of his days lying down in a recliner. He would sometimes apologize to me that he couldn't do for me things other fathers could do. But the reality is that during those years, he gave me everything. Because instead of allowing himself to become unmanned by his personal misery, whenever I sat down across from him, he would listen to me, focus his full attention on me, and in so doing, prove to me that I mattered. Because he could do little more than have conversations, that became our regular father-son activity. We'd talk for hours at a time, often late into the night. And that is when I learned to think. Quite literally, my father shaped the framework of my mind by teaching me what it was to think critically. We'd talk about history, politics, science, psychology, theology, everything. And all the while, he would push me, grill me, test me, refusing to let me be intellectually lazy, ever challenging me to apply the principles of reason and logic, all without losing sight of the importance of compassion, sympathy, and understanding. And as he selflessly grappled with his own pain to focus on my needs, I learned not only what it was to think, but what it looked like to bear pain as a man. I learned by watching my father's example, and example. Finally, in 1987, he underwent surgery. It was very risky because of how high up the spine his injury was. Thankfully, he came through all right. And then for about a year, he was almost pain-free. Then in October of 1988, disaster struck again. Much worse this time. In a freak accident, his neck was injured again, but now so high up the spine that it was totally inoperable. So began a decade of suffering and loss, so horrible it makes me shudder to think back. I won't lay out the whole epic nightmare, but it was a nightmare. And through those years, again, I watched my father. Again, I learned from his example. Eventually, he told me about what that time was like for him. The worst hours were generally in the dead of night. While the rest of the world was asleep, he would be awake and in terrible pain, desperately fighting to stave off panic, waging a silent war in his own head to keep from coming unglued, to simply remain himself. Alone in the darkness, he endured his pain like a man. And then, come daylight, he continued to do so by showing love and affection to his wife and 2 sons when they came in to see him. It took 10 years for him to get back something approximating a normal life. 10 years of heroism and endurance. Quite a legacy. Are you looking to find meaning in your pain? Then consider this. Bearing pain well is an act of love to those around you. Not only as a function of validating them in the moment, but also in that you are emblazoning in their minds an image they will carry with them. If you truly love someone, what you want for them is to be able to stand in the days of testing. Especially if you have children, you want them to be able to cope with the pain that life is inevitably going to throw at them. You want them to make it through, to not crumble. And you showing them how, your example, is the best chance they've got. Because when it comes their turn, they'll know from having seen it with their own eyes that it's possible and what it looks like. My father didn't know it when he was dealing with his neck injuries. But many years later, it would be his son who was flat on his back with a spine injury, trying to stave off panic in the wee hours of the night. And I can tell you, there were moments when the one thing that helped me more than anything else to keep my nerve, to stay myself, was the image of my father, decades earlier, doing the very same thing, proving it was possible for love of his family. Even if you don't have kids or a wife, your example can profoundly affect those around you. I go to a coffee shop several times a week, and the fellow who usually serves me has very serious chronic health issues that keep him in nearly constant pain. But every time I see him, he greets me with a huge smile. He asks me all about how I'm doing. He shows interest in me, concern for me. And I am humbled every time. And every time I leave challenged to be a better man. Pain, whether physical or emotional, is never without meaning for the man who chooses to bear it well. It puts you in the company of the only men whose company is worth being in. And it is an act of love that can echo in the lives of others for generations. In closing, there's a great line from the movie The Edge, written by David Mamet. After surviving a plane crash and then a series of unbelievable hardships in the wild, one of the characters eventually has a chance to talk to someone about his ordeal. And what he says is this: we are all put to the test, but it never comes in the form or at the point that we would prefer. Ain't that the truth? But then again, in a very true sense, it doesn't matter what the trial is or when it comes. It doesn't matter that it wasn't what you expected or planned on. What matters is that regardless of what the test looks like or how it came to you, it means something because you have meaning and the people around you have meaning. And by focusing on that, even though the pain is not lessened, somehow you are made stronger. I really hope this video has been of some encouragement to some of you guys out there. And if any of you have insights from your own trials that might be helpful to the rest of us, please feel free to share them in the comments below. I'm Marcus McGregor. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. If you'd like to subscribe, go for it. Just remember that you won't be shown new videos when they post unless you also click the notification bell.